best of them all. Step back, 4-3. Phoenix forced a turnover at halfway. Oh, yes, sir. Yes, sir. Took it. Clock at 10. Adams the off balance. Oh my goodness. 2 on the clock.
Hello and welcome back to Beyond the Buzzer, the Basketball Fix's #1 podcast. Better than the Cat Chat, better than Supercoach, better than anything.
Because you're ugly mugs on it.
Exactly.
Okay.
Oh, it's the three of us. We
Might
have
be the best, but it's the ugliest.
Yeah, well, it depends. Maybe we're looking pretty good, boys. Josh has got a new haircut. You shaved yesterday or this morning,
Show us
maybe.
the mullet, Josh. Get the mullet out, mate.
It's a bit of hard work
Give
getting
the,
it out, but
give the people what they want.
Give them
Look
what
at
they
that.
want.
building.
Oh.
Definitely building.
Oof.
Yeah, fresh tune.
It is, of course, Beyond the Buzzer. We're going to look at round 12, and I'm so happy to be back. Josh, you're back in the hot seat this week. Last week, you were so disappointed in your Supercoach that you didn't even want to be a part of anything, any podcast on the Basketball Fix stream. But we're happy you're back. How has your rest week gone?
Well, I've only just remembered that I actually beat Jez the week before in a league, and we didn't even touch on that just in the NBL Supercoach. So I'm actually really disappointed now. So, I don't care about your $5.99 last week, Jez. I want to just touch on that. I absolutely annihilated you the week before. But, yeah, mate, really good. Obviously, again, thank you guys for carrying and steering the ship last week. I was away at my part-time job. Obviously, it's just full-time, but my part-time job. I heard you guys throwing that little comment in there as well. And then obviously I got food poisoning Thursday and Friday, so I was all but certainly going to the Wildcats game. I had press conferences booked, I had everything ready to go, and got food poisoning from Zamburos. So thank you for that, Zamburos, which was always lovely.
Certainly not getting sponsored by Zamburos, are we? No.
I don't think I
Cross
want
that
that
one off the
anyway, to
list.
be honest with you. But if they make us sick, boys, we shouldn't be wanting them anyways. But no, I'm good, boys. I had a massive
Gomez
week,
all the way,
obviously,
mate.
watching
Guzman and
NBL
Gomez.
basketball. That's it. GYG is the gun.
Yeah,
But,
yeah.
incredible. I'm looking forward to breaking down all the big news topics from the week that was. And, there's plenty to talk about for sure.
Jezza, how are you, mate? Good to see you back in again as well with your retro rugby league jersey on.
Yeah, I don't know. I felt retro this morning when I got up. So, but I don't know. I don't have much to say. Haven't been doing much. Working, focusing on Supercoach, making sure I am keeping tabs on Josh and keeping him well behind me there. But I was going to make a mum joke as well, but I thought I'd keep that one to myself. So let's move on to somebody else before I say something stupid.
You boys have been working hard in the background on the basketballfix.com, where we have recently launched the fan zone, where anybody can go in and be a part of the Basketball Fix community, write articles, upload photos, videos, podcasts, anything you do to support and be engaged within the basketball community in Australia. Get over to the Basketball Fix fan zone and join in the conversation there. We're still building it up, and it's great that there are already so many people involved. And the best thing that we like about it, or me personally, is that the fans can write articles, and we'll publish them there and give you your name and your credit, and then you're a published writer on the internet. It's fantastic. What do you reckon, Josh?
Oh, I love it. It's great. Like, there's been such a great, I guess, input from everyone who's joined so far. They're really enjoying it. Again, it's creating a forum for not only your team or your individual team, it's a forum for the whole NBL. So there's nobody else out there doing what we're doing, and it's really exciting to obviously be a part of this and seeing where this journey goes. And I also want to give a quick little shout out to a new little podcast that I've created with Adam Batt as well. We brought him on aboard to the Basketball Fix, and we've set up a Perth Cat Chat podcast where we break down all the Perth Wildcats' biggest news topics and everything going on in the Perth Wildcats world as well. So by Perth Wildcats fans, for Perth Wildcats fans, and Adam is doing some great work on that as well. So I know he's super, super excited, and one day we might even bring him on and I guess knight him onto the Beyond the Buzzer episodes as well. I think he'd absolutely love that.
He would definitely. Now, boys, today we have a little bit to talk about. Let's look first at round 11. And the biggest, I guess, news or what do you call it, happening out is Bryce Cotton busting out again. This dude is just unstoppable right now. Josh, where do you start with Bryce Cotton?
Well, I think you've just got to start with wow. Like, I'm spewing I missed last week because I just wanted to break down the 59 points and just go off on a tangent. I would have been happy to talk about that for 45 minutes if I'm being completely honest with you. But he's gone and scored 59 points, 40 points, and then 49 points for a combined 148 points across his last three games. Now,
Quick math.
he is quick maths, yeah. So he is the first player since Andrew Gaze to score triple 40-point games in a row, which is just incredible. We're seeing greatness right now. We are seeing pure greatness, and we will touch on the topic a little bit later on in the show. But this guy is on an absolute tear, and I just think it's his ability to obviously make incredible shots. I personally think the Perth Wildcats need to do a better job with him, though. I think they're leaving him to play too much isolation basketball. If you watch when Jesse Wagstaff comes onto the court, that is when Bryce Cotton is at his complete and best, because Jesse works with him very well. You see it all the time. Little pick and roll, pick and pops, even just a little, behind the defender's back, and Cotton runs into it for a nice little mid-range pull-up or a drive to the basket. It's working with him. And I think the most important thing, obviously, over the next couple of weeks, I saw that, Ryan, but the next couple of weeks, obviously, is with Doolittle potentially out for some time, Keanu Pinder not really establishing himself as that big man presence, and Issam Almansa, a really relatively young and inexperienced centre. I'm not sure if they're going to get that out of anyone else that what Jesse does. And that's really going to either affect Bryce as we go along, because they're just going to start throwing numbers at him. We saw last year at the end of the season, he got really, really tired when Illawarra were just throwing 2 and 3 defenders at him every single time he got the ball and making him pass to the other players on their team. Now, granted, I think the Perth Wildcats are a much better offensive team this season than what they were last year. But again, though, you've got to continue to feed the hot hand. And I love this. I am absolutely loving this. I think his playmaking stepped up as well because, everyone's drawing in on him every time he even goes to the basket. He's finding shooters out in the three-point line. Like Elijah had some big shots. Dylan Windler had some big shots over the weekend. Benny Henschel is coming along for the ride. So it's really incredible to see, but I would still like to see a slightly less make it all about Bryce. Or what's the right way of saying it? Maybe leaving it all in Bryce's court. I think that's probably the better way of describing it. It's still a team sport. The Wildcats teammates are still going to do their thing, but Bryce is on an absolute heater, boys.
Jez, do you think, we spoke about this in the pre-season, that the key to Perth's success this year would be surrounding Bryce Cotton with suitable pieces to help his game and, I guess, take some weight off his shoulders? Do you think... we've spoken at length, I think, in these episodes that we believe the pieces are there. Is it now a question of John really using those pieces in the right way?
I think there's going to come a time where they have to do that, because like Josh just said, all of a sudden Bryce is going to get tired. He's going to start getting doubled. Teams are going to, because you're going to have to defend it. You're going to have to work harder on defense, and eventually he's going to have to, he's going to have to start feeding, because he can't stay, famous last words, he can't stay this hot for the rest of the season and expect that he's not going to get doubled, or they're not going to start putting more defensive pressure on him. So all of a sudden he is going to have to dish off to these guys, but maybe that's why also he's getting a little bit of the space that he is getting. Like, he is pulling off some amazing shots. Some stuff it is completely unguardable, but the fact of the matter is if he can start supplying some of these other guys, like we said, like Elijah Pepper, Ben Henschel, that are also really, really strong from the perimeter, and even Windler, Perth are going to become a championship team, at least offensively. Because we can go on to a whole nother tangent of what's going on with Perth and why they're giving up a whole heap of points defensively. And you're right, you've got to feed Bryce while he is hot. So these other guys aren't really sort of needed at the moment, in a sense, but there will be a time when they will get called upon, and then it's up to them to get into the game. Because I think earlier in the season, or before maybe Bryce got injured, they were trying to work that out, and they were trying to sort of find out, okay, where do guys like Henschel fit this year? Where does Elijah Pepper fit? Where does Windler fit? And it was almost to their detriment a little bit, because they just weren't finding that identity. Perth are best when Bryce Cotton is at the center of absolutely everything. but they have to make sure that they're going to be able to get some of these other guys involved, and they don't cool down while Bryce is scoring 50% of the points in each game, which is what he's almost doing right now. Because so that's the fear, is some of these other players and these satellite players around him lose their confidence, fall out of form. And then when it comes to the playoffs and Bryce starts to get doubled, there's nobody that's ready to step up and take a bit of the pressure off Cotton, or be there on these big plays where he's going to get doubled and they've got to make a clutch shot. So that's the danger you sort of run into. And that's the danger that I guess Perth have had to deal with for quite a while now, because Bryce is so good and he's got to have the ball in his hands when he's hot. But you've got to make sure that you find that balance and don't make the same mistakes that maybe they did last season when they should have been in the final but didn't quite get there.
Yeah, nice and quick as well. So I think the Wildcats have shown the ability to obviously not be Bryce-centric. If you look back to not the round that just was, but the round before that where he had his 59-point game, the first game of that they played against the Brisbane Bullets had 8 players in their team score over double digits, which is incredible. All 5 starters and 3 on the bench, and then obviously Bryce has had his explosion ever since. So they've shown that they've got all the pieces, like you've mentioned, on the offensive end. Yes, the defense is the question. But again, though, that's more of a buy-in thing, I think, a teamwork and camaraderie thing, which I think that they will establish over this huge away period, which they go into now for the next roughly 4 weeks now. So they're going to have a lot of time to have those tough conversations and really nail down on a few things as well. So I think defense will be the number one topic over the next 4 weeks for the Wildcats.
Do you think, sorry, just to keep rambling on about this, and I guess it is Perth, do you think it's a good thing for them now, when they obviously need to work on their defense, to go through this big patch of away games in a big clump? We've noticed with Perth at the start of the year that they've sort of struggled to play these back-to-backs and be like at home and away. Do you think it's a benefit now where it's like, okay, you've got to work on things defensively. It's better. You're a better team if you can play better defense on the road. And then they're just going on is it a 7-game stretch, I think, on the road? Is that a benefit, or is it a disability?
No, it's definitely a benefit. And I think that the biggest benefit is these guys are going to spend majority of their time together. And that's what people don't talk about in sports. It's not about sometimes what you're doing on the court. It's what you're doing off the court, because off the court sort of behaviours and attitudes, and I've seen it firsthand with coaching. If your off the court stuff and off the field stuff is not working well, and you've got a little bit of turmoil off the court, that will show on the court. And that's what's showing, I think, realistically with the defense. I think all these guys get along well, but there's another level to getting along. And when you get along with one another, you want to run that little bit harder to get to that guy and close him out and all that sort of stuff as well. So I think that's where we will see a change in the Perth Wildcats for the better. And like I said, though, it's going to come down to a few tough conversations for sure.
Now, as there always is, when a player in the NBL gets hot and starts producing or exceeding expectations, the chat around going to the NBA arises. And that's what's happening now with Bryce Cotton. There's rumours starting to come out about, will an NBA team pick him up once NBL 25 is finished? And there have been some questions in our community already that we've seen people asking us, what do we think? Josh, I'll throw to you on this one as the resident Perth expert. Where does Bryce Cotton sit in the discussions around the NBA?
Oh, he is as good of a player in the NBL that there has been, and there has been this season, for example, as well. And, it's always unfair, I think, personally, when Bryce is nearly the MVP every season or is in the conversation every season. But we're talking about, MVP candidates from 2 to 5 who potentially could make it to the NBA, or why aren't they in the NBA? And some of those guys have gone on to go and play in the NBA. We've seen guys like Jay Sean Tate go on and play in the NBA. We've seen guys like Jock Landale go on and play in the NBA. But Bryce has never gotten his chance. And I think he's had a chance, to be honest with you. Let me rephrase that. I just don't think he's wanted to go there as well. Now, I reckon there's interest every season for him to go over there and have a crack. But for whatever reason, he's so set in Perth. And I think he knows mentally, physically, and just family-wise that he's set in Perth. Now, he's got to play 1 or 2 games every weekend instead of playing potentially 3 games a week, travelling here, there, everywhere, kid on the road, bringing his missus along as well. The furthest he's got to travel realistically is 8 hours, and he's back the same night anyways. They normally play and fly back the same night or early hours the next morning. So, realistically, I think he's so settled in Australia. Now, is he 100% set on the Perth Wildcats for next season? I think it's 80-20 as of right now. And the Wildcats over the next sort of, I think this away stretch really have got to, either make that 90-10 or they're going to make that 70-30. That's as simple as it is. And if I'm Mark Arena, I'm having these conversations, and Danny Mills having these conversations with Bryce. Here's a blank check, mate. If you want $2 million, write it down and we will sign that, because you've got to pay this guy whatever you want to pay him, because there's a reason why the Perth Wildcats have such a high price ticket per game for entry. It's obviously the stadium. It's a really state-of-the-art stadium, but it's Bryce Cotton. He's getting paid a lot of money, which he deserves, and the club is trying to obviously hedge their profits there as well with their high ticket prices. So, to be honest with you, I don't know too many Perth Wildcats fans who wouldn't pay $50 to $150 a game to go watch the stuff that Bryce is doing right now. And if you say that you wouldn't do that, you're not really a fan of the Perth Wildcats. So I think at the end of the day, this guy's an absolute tear. The NBA conversations are always going to be there. I think if he wanted to, he would have already gone over to the NBA, but I think he's well and truly set over here in Australia in the NBL.
Jez, we just spoke about Josh's second favourite team. His first favourite team, the Adelaide 36ers, saw the return of Kendrick Davis from suspension, and he busted out on a team that has been struggling with their depth. They've been so reliant on their starting five this season. Dejan Vasiljevic out injured, Montrezl Harrell still suspended. Kendrick Davis was a godsend to this team, especially in this game. They ended up losing, but he was still really, really good. How do you see his kind of return, and what does it mean for Adelaide?
Yeah, well, it was huge, and you certainly see Adelaide as a completely different team, especially offensively when Kendrick Davis is in the lineup. He proved that he is absolutely one of the best players in the competition. Definitely needs to be in that MVP conversation at the end of the year, which everybody loves to chat about and give their rankings. He is definitely up there. Crazy if you don't think so. He comes out, first game back, you just sort of never know how players are going to react after a situation that unfolded there in Melbourne. But 37 points, 11 assists, 5 rebounds, almost single-handedly took the Adelaide 36ers to a win over Josh's second favourite team, the Perth Wildcats. But he just exploded. It was completely unstoppable in my opinion for two reasons. He come out straight away in that game and put any conversation or any thoughts out of anybody's head of what sort of mood he was in. And I think he dropped 15 points in the first quarter, something like that. And then, you know what actually happened? It sort of shifted, because that's what makes Davis so dangerous and definitely makes him one of the best players in the competition, is if he comes out and he scores points quickly and early and finds his rhythm, he becomes unstoppable, because he sort of backs off then because he's getting more attention, and then he starts feeding the ball. And obviously he didn't have his number one target in Montrezl Harrell there, but he got the most out of Humphreys. We saw even some satellite guys like Rasmussen come in and drop some shots. Davis was just started. He went quiet on the scoreboard for a big period there and just started feeding, and you just watched that assist count just tick over and over and over and over. And then once they started going, oh shit, we can't double you anymore, he just started dropping points. So he becomes that dual threat, that real danger where if you want to give me space, I'll sink the buckets. But if you want to start doubling me and giving me more attention, I'll find the guy that's free. And then you just get stuck then sitting in no man's land, and then you're completely screwed because he'll be feeding assists and he'll be dropping shots. So absolute dominant performance. I think it was really good to see. Stopped everybody talking about the situation that happened. Now we can just focus on basketball, and it was an incredible performance. Probably you can definitely put it up there as one of the performances of the round, or even of the season, because of the situation that Davis was in.
Josh, do you think he's being slept on as an MVP candidate this season? There's not really much talk about him in the media.
There isn't, but there is now. He's the second, NBL just put out their thing today. Now he's now into number 2 on their power rankings for their MVP. So it's Cotton, Davis, and Parker Jackson Cartwright. So, it doesn't take much in the NBL. It only takes a couple of good games. And if you look at his last 2 games now, he's scored over 30 points and had over 10 assists. So that's MVP numbers in my books. And, I just think we've also not me necessarily. I think it's more been yourself, Ryan. But we've been touching on their depth a little bit, but they're starting to unlock a few players now. Isaac Humphries is really getting it going now in this season. I think Jarrell Martin's still got another 3 or 4 levels to hit before he's at his top and the peak of his powers. Montrezl Harrell is still to come back to this team. Dejan Vasiljevic is hurt right now. Nick Marshall was pretty solid, I think, personally, in both of those games. Kadee finds a way to constantly hit big shots. I've just rattled off 7 names there. And then even guys like Lat Mayen, who has been a little bit under the weather over the last month, has been okay, and he will get better as the season goes on. And then we've seen Keanu Rasmus, Jacob Rigoni, a lot of these guys.
Sunday Dench even was extremely hot
Sunday Dench
against Brisbane at the start, but pulled up with a little bit of an injury and slowed down. But he was on fire as well.
Well, that was against the Wildcats, so he pulled up.
Until they start winning, and it's because of their bench players, I'm not giving them any props. We've got to move along, boys. The Brisbane Bullets have had a lot of success over these last 2 weeks. There've been plenty of questions around this team in the first half of the season, mainly their defense, but the offense is really starting to fire. Tyrell Harrison has been on an absolute tear over the last few weeks, and then being backed up by Casey Prather and Bateman and Bannon has been great when he's been on the floor. Josh, how do you kind of rank this Brisbane Bullets team? And even without Zakarski performing, they're still doing really well.
Yeah, well, I still think they're not going to be a playoff team. That's not what I'm going to be trying to establish over this next little bit of conversation here. But what they are seeing is they've seen 3 wins in their past 4 games. And I think the biggest question, and I've even flagged in articles and also on Beyond the Buzzer, is their offensive style. Now, it was always very, very slow. It was high pick and sort of post plays with Josh Bannon or Tyrell Harrison, and it was all running through them, whether it be pick and rolls or sort of drop passes or anything like that. And it was very stagnant offense. But you've seen over the last, I'd say 2 weeks or 3 weeks even, this pace of play has picked up. And it's been exciting because what you're doing is you're pushing the ball very, very fast and you're getting opposition defenders out of their positions very quickly. Now, we just saw him put 122 points against Melbourne United on the weekend. Now, that is the most points that Melbourne United have conceded ever at John Cain Arena, which is just absurd. 122 points against Melbourne doesn't happen. Even 100 points realistically doesn't happen very often. Now, I know that they've obviously had their little bit of a problem over the last couple of weeks with their defense, but they've been on absolute tear. So I'm really liking the play of their imports as well. Keandre Cook, James Bateman, Casey Prather, they've all been really, really solid. And, you know, I think personally that they've got to keep this same core that they've been building on right now. And I would bring Josh Bannon through the bench again. He did it at the start of the season. He was really successful with it. He was averaging around 9 points and 9 assists. 9 points, 9 rebounds when he was on the bench. And the same with Daniel Dell. So don't wreck a good thing, Brisbane. Continue to play the way you're playing. I am not the biggest believer in Rocco right now. Longevity, I'm 100% on his side. But for what he's producing, as of right now, I don't think he's a top 25 pick, which he's currently ranked at. I personally have, Lachlan Aldrich ahead of him, Malik Lewis, Itano Munsa, Benny Henschel, those guys who are well and truly into the 50s and 60s, which I find absurd. So, again, a lot of questions around Brisbane. I'm not saying that they're a championship contender right now, but Brisbane fans, they're finally having that bit of fun and a bit of excitement in their life, which every team deserves to have. And, obviously it might be a little bit of false hope and false promises, but it's looking fun and they're having a lot of fun doing it.
Yeah, I think it all stops pretty much this weekend. I'm going to be an absolute party pooper on the Brisbane train, unfortunately, and stop that bullet because I think they're running hot. And yeah, they got some wins, but they played some teams in the right situations. I think if you look at their first win of these 3 or 4 that you're talking about, they played Perth on the second leg of a double game week, and it was right before the international break. I think you can put that into perspective. Perth, I don't think have won a game when they've had to play away on that big double game week stretch that they did have when they were the away team. So you give them that, and then they come and they have to fly to Perth and they get absolutely pumped. And then they go up last weekend and first of all flag that they shot, I think 56% from the field versus Adelaide and then 64% versus Melbourne. Brisbane aren't going to shoot 64% against maybe not any team from the field for the rest of the season. I don't really think that the longevity there of this performance is going to hold out for Brisbane. They really sort of shifted from, like you said, playing this down low post type play, now starting to use their point guards, and they're getting, I think having Casey Prather in there as another shooter and has been hot, gives them this dynamic where they can put up a whole heap of points. But I don't think it's going to hold, unfortunately, because purely the laws of averages, they're going to start to struggle. If in the game where they lost against Perth, they shot 25% from 3-pointers from the 3-point line. That's maybe not 25%, maybe low, but I think if they're not holding this high shooting percentage, all of a sudden these games that they're winning do start to get a little bit closer. And a little bit like what we touched on with Perth is Brisbane don't have a Bryce Cotton that's going to bail them out of trouble, because you're going to see some of these guys, Bateman, Keandre Cook and Casey Prather aren't at that Bryce Cotton level, and he's the one that's been sort of carrying Perth. When you've got a defense that leaks as many points as Brisbane do, I think eventually it's going to catch up on you. And they've just sort of been winning at the moment in these situational games that have played out really well for them. I think we might have a little bit of trouble this weekend, and we'll start to see the cracks in Brisbane's game this weekend.
1-1 this weekend, I reckon.
Well, it'll be interesting to follow their development over the next few weeks. Now, boys, let's take a quick break. We'll come back and get into some things, or some discussion about what's happening in the NBL right now. Okay, so the first thing I want to talk about, Josh, and this is directed at you, it's the defense. And you're calling it a bit of a defense crisis. Now, I believe you might be out on a bit of a limb here, because the average scoring this season in the 134 games that have been played so far, or that's actually not including the round just gone, it's the first 134 games, the scoring is actually less per game on average than last season. But it is still higher than the 2 seasons previous to that. But I think you're maybe getting at there's a different reason to why the scoring's been higher. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, well, quickly, just a little bit of a back at you, what you just said there. If you go back and look at last season, the start of the season's scoring was red hot compared to what it has been like this year. Other way around. Last season, it was very similar. At this point of the season last year, the teams were scoring pretty low, and then it really ramped up later on in the season. So, it's going to be interesting to see the way this goes. But the defensive crisis is 100% happening in the NBL. We're seeing the modern NBA game, I think, coming a little bit too far over here. And that's what we're seeing with, obviously, these international coaches coming over here. So Pedri Cotton, obviously Josh King as well, who's a guy who's coached over in America and around the ranks as well. JR, who's an offensive beast back in the day himself. Brian Goorjian, he's adopted a very offensive and trigger-happy sort of offense. And even Mike Wells as well in Adelaide, who is an American coach and an ex-NBA coach. So we're seeing teams really focusing on the offensive end and not focusing on the defensive end. So I really want to highlight last round. And it was a weird round for sure. Now, there were 8 games on the weekends. Now, in four of those games, we had one team in those games at least score over 100 points. In 3 of those games, we had both teams score over 100 points. There we go. Sorry, I'm just getting my head around what I've written here as well. And then in 2 of those games, we had both teams score over 110 points. And in those 2 games, the winning team scored over 120. So if you wind that back and look to the top points per game team in the NBL, is the Illawarra Hawks. Now, they're averaging 98.7 points per game. Now, on the weekend, they put 121 points up on the Perth Wildcats. So if you're looking at those games, half of those games had at least one or more teams score over 100 points in them, which is absurd when you look at the averages. And that's not just been this week, that's been last week, the week before that, and even the week before that as well. We have seen Chris Goulding score 46 points, James Bateman score 51 points, Bryce Cotton score 59, 40, and 49 points. So that just doesn't happen in many leagues around the world in a 40-minute era. Right, let's just put that in context as well. We're playing 40-minute basketball, and some of these scores are in line with NBA scores, which are a 48-minute game. So defense really has slipped a lot. And I think it comes down to a lot of things. If you look at this season, now I'm going to highlight the Perth Wildcats, the Illawarra Hawks, and the Sydney Kings. So the way teams have beaten those teams in particular has been through, I think personally, the full court press. So you're quickening up those teams and not letting them settle into their offense. Now, they can obviously get on top of that and just play faster and just put up more threes and more threes and more threes. But it's unsettling the team. Now, they're not going to score those 120 points, even 110. They're going to be looking 90 to 95, even to 100 maximum. So I think that's a really big thing. And the other thing that I've been very hot on is the 2-3 zone. So the 2-3 zone, I think, is the most effective zone to stop the corner 3-point shots and also obviously on the top of the key 3-point shots as well. Because you've got the space to be able to push out there. Your two guys behind you on the wings can push out to the guys in the corners, and you've got a solid post man. But the only thing with that is you've got to have a solid post player inside who's ready to put his body on the line every single time. Because at the end of the day, you're trying to force people into the paint to obviously try and get over the big man. Now, it doesn't work for teams like Perth because they haven't got that big man presence, right? Obviously, Sydney have got that. A lot of other teams in the NBL do. But there's a few little things that teams should be starting to implement or think about because the defensive crisis is just at an all-time high right now. Offense is obviously really good. I wrote an article and put it out over the next couple of days, or we've just released it today, sorry. Offense sells tickets, defense wins championships, right? That is the most easy saying. It has been one of the most used sayings in sport history. It is not a truer saying than that. So I personally think the NBL has really got to step it up on the defensive end and really, whilst it's very exciting watching these scoring explosions, focus on defense because if you're worried about fans and bums on seat, try to keep scoring. But if you want to win an NBL championship, it's time to start defending.
Wow. Can you pull that quote out and send it to all the coaches in the NBL? And it was a very powerful quote. I like it. Mate, but I think it was a half rant. I think it has something to do with the playing style, and that's what I wanted to touch on a little bit. Is the 3-point shooting has really taken off this season. If we look back just at last season, there was only one team that averaged 30 or more 3-point attempts per game, and already this season, just counting up now, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 teams are averaging 30 or more 3-point shots per game, and we know that defense is important, but defense you need to work on, and it needs to be almost second nature to you. When I spoke to Liam Santamaria about the Next Stars the other week, he kind of spoke a little bit about how these other guys coming into the NBL, they need to be taught the way how to defend because they're not getting it done in college or in junior sports in the same way that you need to be able to defend in the NBL. And that was primarily focused up until, I think, very recently on defending the paint, defending those 2-point shots and stopping people, those charging lanes. Now the teams are shooting from 3. The defensive strategy and the defensive training needs to change to be able to cut out those perimeter shots. We see Illawarra are one of the better teams at closing out on threes because they have even their big men are quite athletic. They can move around the floor. They're not big and heavy. They are quite mobile, and their guards are very quick. So they can shut down 3-point attempts, I think, at a much better rate than most of the teams in the NBL. But I just don't think that the defensive strategy and the defensive trading has caught up as quick as what teams have decided to start shooting from 3. Because you see the numbers here. This, as you said, you believe the scoring is up because of the defensive strategies, and we see that the 3-point attempts are up at an amazing rate. You know, having 5 teams shooting more than 30 3-point attempts per game is a massive increase on last season. Do you feel that I'm onto something there, or do you think I'm completely out of whack?
No, I think you're bang on. I just think it's been such a interesting watch over the last couple of weeks. Like, I even think the pick and roll and the pick and pop has just been used majority of the time down the court. If you look at Melbourne United, who's probably been their best player outside of Chris Goulding this season? Rob Lowe? Like, you nearly could say that. You could make a case for that. Obviously, Jack White's been a gun, but Rob Lowe's putting up 20 to 25 of these last 3 weeks. And how does he get majority of his shots? Well, he sets a big pick, gets his defender off the ground. Most big men will go to the basket. He just sits back and then puts a big 3 over the top of their head. And he's got the funniest little style you'll ever see, but it works. So all of these teams are using the same certain things. They're either running down the court and throwing up a 3-point shot, they're running down the court and making an isolation play, or they've got a pick and roll, a pick and pop, and it's just working because there's not much resistance from the opposition. It just seems like most teams are going in there saying, we can score 105 and we're going to try and hold a team to under 105 and make it a shootout. That's just what it seems like. So it's super, super interesting for sure. And yeah, it's going to be interesting to see it the next couple of weeks as well.
Jez, when it comes to scoring, who are the guys that are leading this charge? And do you think it is a kind of certified process and thought from these teams like, okay, we need to get Chris Golding these shots. We need to get Bryce Cotton the time and the ball. We need to get, whoever it could be on a team. How do you see it?
Yeah, well, I think you put it towards the recruiting as well. I think at the start of the season, we said this is the most talented group of NBL players we've seen in a long while. You're looking at teams that are bringing in these imports like Kendrick Davis. You can list them off, even like Matt Hurt, Illawarra, you've got Darius Days. You're getting these more offensive-powered imports that are coming into the NBL, and I think that's where the mismatch is. Teams aren't right now going out and looking for these defensive specialist players as much as maybe they were. We're looking for these star guys that are very aggressive offensively. That can also play a little bit of defense as well. But I think the whole mindset at the moment in the league has been, we're all about scoring. And just like you said, the NBL is in this growth period right now. And you know what? It's pretty important for all of these teams to be going out and making sure they are scoring because they're trying to build the level of this league. And unfortunately, like you said, defense might win championships, but tickets are putting bums on seats, and offense is putting bums on seats, and it's also putting the eyes on the NBL because we had that conversation earlier about Bryce Cotton, NBA teams looking at Bryce Cotton, NBA teams looking again at Montrezl Harrell, NBA teams looking at Kendrick Davis. All this scoring and all these high scores, 100-plus scores in a 40-minute game is bringing attention to the NBL, and that's exactly what the NBL wants. And I believe it's definitely it's serving its purpose for the league. And I think it is the way that basketball is changing. We've touched on this also a little in earlier episodes of everything's changing towards this 3-point shot and all this shooting, and all of it is it's taking away from that ground, the excitement of these massive dunks and this hard game going to the rim, but it's the percentages. Sport's becoming all about advanced statistics, and it is known, if you can shoot and you can get more perimeter shots, you get more points at the end of the game, even if you're missing at a higher rate. So teams aren't stupid anymore. Everything's becoming so intelligent. So you've got to bring these scorers in, got to bring these shooters in. It works better for the NBA game, and it's bringing eyes to the league. So I don't know. There's not a problem with it, but it's definitely serving its purpose, having all of these exciting players coming and dropping massive, massive points in a 40-minute game.
All right, we're going to take another quick break. We'll come back and we're going to discuss who is the NBL GOAT.
Derek Rucker.
Jez got a fantastic
Derek Rucker tonight.
It's the perfect little, got it right in there before the cutout. Now, we've whittled this down, or I wouldn't say we. Josh, you've whittled this down to, the discussions between Andrew Gaze and Bryce Cotton. I'll let you go first, and then Jez and I will maybe come back at you, or we're going to agree. Let's see what happens.
All right, well, let's get into this, boys. Now, like all great GOAT debates, there's always only two players. In the NBA, we've got Michael and LeBron. In the NBL, we've got Gazy and Cotton. Now, I 100% believe this, and this is not Perth Wildcats biasy. I just think what you've got to look at, and I'm going to read off his stats here, but that Bryce Cotton is the greatest player of all time in the NBL. Now, when Corey Homicide Williams here, rest in peace, was here, I had a chat with him on the Basketball Fix podcast about 3 years ago now, and he 3 years ago said that Bryce Cotton is the greatest import of all time, and he's a top 5 player of all time, essentially. So that's 3 years ago. Since then, he's won another MVP, and he's had some incredible stats along the way. So, Bryce Cotton's been at the Perth Wildcats since the 2016 to 2024-25 season currently. So this is his 9th season in the NBL. In that time, he's won 3 NBL championships. He's an NBL Cup winner, which I don't really worry about, but at the end of the day, it's still another statistic. He's a 2-time NBL Grand Final MVP. He's a 4-time NBL MVP. He's a 7-time All-NBL First Teamer. And he's a 7-time NBL scoring champion. Now, he's well and truly on for another scoring championship this season. He's averaging 26.4 points per game right now, which is the best career average of his career so far. So his career average is 22.7 points per game. So that's across his 9 seasons so far. Now, like I mentioned, 26.4 points right now. But when I look at Bryce, the statistics and the accolades are one thing, but you've got to look at who he's playing against in the NBL. So no disrespect to Andrew Gaze, right? And this is no disrespect at all. And this is no disrespect to some of the all-time great players in the NBL. But from players 8 to 12 on NBL rosters, and maybe even 7 to 12 back in the day, they were just gardeners who would go and work 12 hours a day and come play basketball at night for a bit of fun. And that's no disrespect. That's just how sport was back in those days. The league wasn't at a professional setting where 1 to 15 players on your roster were genuine superstar quality players who train like superstar players as well. So it's not just a part-time job now, it's a full-time job. We have sports science, we have everything involved in the NBL nowadays that those guys didn't have. So that helps the players nowadays, but what else it also do? It makes the players nowadays at such a high level. So you look at the talent across the board, Parker Jackson Cartwright, Kendrick Davis, Montrezl Harrell, just this season alone, you know, there's such a plethora of talent. Ex-NBA guys, Matt Hurt, Jack White, who have spent time in this sort of, you know, in the NBA, who are in this league right now. Recent seasons, we've had some of the greatest players, you know, sort of around the international basketball world come to the NBL and had chances to go to the NBA. We've seen plenty of kids be picked up to the NBA draft. This is the most competitive period of NBL basketball that the league has ever seen. And the league is in the best spot. And it's a massive credit to obviously, you know, everyone involved, Larry Kesselman, obviously the owner of the league, who has got the league in such a healthy spot where people are wanting to come over to the league. So if there's a GOAT discussion about everything, you know, when we're looking at just player v player, Cotton v Gazy, Gazy's obviously got, you know, another potentially 7-8 years on Cotton right now. So you give Cotton that extra sample size that he's missed out right now. I don't know. I think Cotton could also achieve some very similar things to Andrew Gaze. But again, I'm not trying to disrespect Andrew Gaze. I think he's a top 2 player of all time. I'm looking forward, obviously, to hearing what you boys think about this whole discussion. And it's really, really intriguing. And I know a lot of people say, you can't compare eras. Well, you can't compare eras, but you compare players, I think, personally. So I don't know. It's going to be interesting. But for me, boys, and I think a lot of people out in the NBL world, Bryce Cotton is the greatest of all time in the NBL. Who's going to fire me up first?
I was giving some space for Jez to do some funny chat, but maybe you were too strong in your. Yeah, I think it's very, very. What do you call it? I've lost my word, but when you do the preparation for this show and you've put these 2 players against each other and you've pulled the stats into our run sheet, I think it's very. I can't even think of the word that you've cherry picked a heap of stats for Bryce Cotton and you've put like 4 or 5 stats for Gazy. So I think you were kind of almost setting us up for failure to kind of give you back on, what Andrew Gaze.
These 4 or 5 stats, though, are what he has achieved in the NBL. They're like his biggest things. Like there are awards that Gazy won back in the day, you know, NBL's Prodigy Award, I think it is, or Legacy Award. Like, realistically, they're not awards nowadays, and it's like the NBL Cup. That's why I don't really count that sort of thing. But read these awards out, and they're still pretty stellar awards, if I'm being honest with you.
So Andrew Gaze played for the Melbourne Tigers between 1984 and 2005 season. So as you kind of alluded to in your chat about Bryce, Gazy has a number of years on him with his career, and I think that definitely plays into the discussion. Is the longevity of a career is extremely important. 2-time NBL champion, 93 and 97. He won the NBL Rookie of the Year in 94, which is a fantastic achievement. 7-time NBL MVP player, 91, 92, and then took 5 years in a row between 94 and 98. The all-time leading scorer in the NBL, 18,908 points across his 612 games. He was or is the owner of the highest points per game average across the NBL all time, and that is at 30.9 points per game. And I'm going over to his Wikipedia page. First in points, first in assists, first in field goals made, first in 3-pointers made, first in free throws made, second in games played, third in steals, and there's about 17 other stats. NBL All-Star 11 times, 2-time NBL All-Star MVP, 14 times NBL scoring champion, 15 All-NBL teams.
Bloody hell.
This all in a time where there wasn't sports science. There wasn't recovery sessions. There wasn't, here, go and do this as a full-time job and get paid a lovely amount of money to do. But it's relative to each other. So he was he was also doing all of that stuff, as all the other guys were, that weren't, obviously. So his talent is natural. He didn't have to train at the same way Bryce does. Didn't have to get the recovery and rehab and sports science and gym class and weight room and all of that stuff that Bryce Cotton has had to get. You know, you could take anybody off the street, put them in a basketball gym with all of that stuff around them, and they're probably going to be pretty good. Andrew Gaze was a natural talent. Smoking
ciggies and drinking tinnies at halftime and still producing.
Exactly.
So hang on, Ryan. So can I just get this right? So would you be willing to forego your next year's salary, and I'll get the Perth Wildcats to bring you over? We'll then get you training for a year. Then I want to send you out onto the NBL court, and I want to see if you can even score 2 points. That's what I'll genuinely be excited about if you can do that. Let's just see how it goes. Because what you're saying right now is any person off the street can come in and have a 4-time NBL MVP career, 7-time scoring champion, greatest player of all time career. Is that what you're trying to say to me right now, or
No.
Is that what we're not going?
You're putting words in my mouth. I could definitely score 2 points if I could train for a whole year in their system. But no, what I'm saying is that you could, in today's how everything works today, you could effectively pick somebody off the street, and you would give them a really good chance to be able to be on the court with everything they have today, the training, the tech, all of that kind of stuff. You could mold somebody to be a player in this sport, whereas back then you couldn't do that. Either you had it or you didn't have it, and Gazy had it. And that's why I think he's the greatest of all time.
Yeah, but I also think as well, like another little quick rebuttal on that is, yes, you can give someone all the resources, right? I go to a job 5 days a week. Am I the greatest Sparky of all time? No. Because I don't go out there and do the extra work behind the scenes, which is what all these great players do. Maybe that as well, but I won't let that. Let's not make sure the boss doesn't hear that one. But at the end of the day, though, right, it's not the work they do in the sort of designated periods. It's the work they do outside of that. So it's the extra shots after trainings. And that's what Gazy was doing back in the day as well. Let's not discredit Gazy's sort of career and the path that he did, because, yeah, he was super, super talented and there was a lot of natural talent, but he worked very, very hard at it such a long period of time. And that's why he was one of the first NBL players to go over and play in the NBA and start that pipeline. Had a really great career for the Australian Boomers as well. So, like I said, there's no disrespect to Andrew Gaze. I just think at the end of the day, we are seeing Bryce Cotton in the greatest era of all time be the greatest player in that era. Now, if you're in the greatest era and you're the greatest player, I think that nearly makes you the greatest player of all time. Personally, I just think it's simple. And it's sort of funny because, like, we're sort of creating points. You know, when we talk about LeBron, it's about statistical advantages. And when we talk about Michael, it's about championships and scoring MVPs. But it's sort of flipped because Gazy's the old guy and obviously Cotton's the young guy. So it's a bit backwards. So I don't know. It's interesting. But, Jez, you got a quick question?
No, it's pretty much on that. It's like, okay, well, what do we have to do, or what do we have to know, or what do we have to see from Bryce Cotton to be able to put a line through this conversation and go, all right, he's definitely the best when it comes to accolades? Or is there nothing that he can do to just, pretty much just end this conversation with, does he need to win? Does Perth need to win a couple more championships and he needs a couple more MVPs? Or is none of those types of awards going to make this conversation any different? Just like the conversations between LeBron and Michael or Brady and Montana, it's, there just doesn't, there's always a rebuttal.
Yeah, well, the only thing, like, I'm going to go before you get on, because you're going to probably say something good. The only stat that Bryce Cotton has over Gazy at the moment is he's won more championships. Otherwise, Gazy's in front of him in every other stat. So if he just gets in front,
the other stat is he's played half the time.
Yeah, well, that's the answer to the question. If he plays and beats Gaze in the majority of the stats, then he'll be classed as the GOAT. If he doesn't, he won't be.
All right, I'm going to rebuttal that in two ways. All right, we said that about Michael. Right, LeBron, if he passes him in scoring, he'll be the greatest of all time. He's now blown past him in scoring, and people still don't consider him the greatest of all time. All right, firstly, I'm going to break this into two little things. 100%, and I'm on the same boat. But I think it's two things. Firstly, we've got to wait for all these old school commentators to get out of this sort of area. All right, Leonard Copeland was his best mate and his teammate. He's going to keep pushing that Gazy was the greatest of all time, because it makes Leonard Copeland one of the greatest players of all time as well. All right, Derek Rucker, the exact same. Damon Lowry. These are guys who all played against Andrew Gaze and got torched by him. So if they don't say he's the greatest player of all time, they're diminishing their careers. And I'll tell you that much. Ego is a massive thing in sport. But I don't think there is a one single measure, to be honest with you, that measures the greatest of all time. Because at the end of the day, the only way we could genuinely consider and obviously touch on who is the greatest of all time is if we grabbed Andrew Gaze and we grabbed Bryce Cotton and we put them on a court together and say who won. But it won't happen because there's 20, 30 years between them two, right? But on accolades right now, yes, Cotton is less, right? He's also won one extra NBL championship than Gazy had in his whole entire career, okay? So he's played half his career and already won one more championship. So if we're looking at the Michael and LeBron sort of, massive debate there and the key topic, it's always, does he win more? Okay, well, Cotton's won more, right? He's obviously been a 7-time scoring champion as well. All right, Gazy had, I think, how many did Gazy have, you said, Ryan? He had quite a few as well.
I think it was 17.
Okay,
No, 14,
17, right?
14,
We've got a bit of way to go there.
14,
okay. So when you compare that, 7 out of 8 years so far, Cotton's been the scoring champion. 14 out of 22 seasons, Andrew Gaze was the scoring champion as well. So these statistics and everything, you could pick straws and you could say this bloke was better here, this bloke was better here, and it comes down to obviously opinion, and we're not going to go on for too much longer, but I'll get the final say in here, and obviously Ryan will still get the chance because he's hosting the show, so he gets the last little say. But I think it's very, very clear. Not very, very clear, but I think it's clear now that Bryce Cotton is the greatest player of all time in the greatest era in the NBL. No disrespect to Andrew Gaze and any of the past legends in the NBL, but we are witnessing pure greatness at its finest.
Well, there you go. Anybody else can continue the chat on the Basketball Fix fan zone. Just a quick. We'll go Basketball Fix MVP votes for round 11. Casey Prather picked up the 1 point. I think it's his first showing on this list. Kendrick Davis in his single game weekend had a fantastic 37 points, 11 assists and 5 rebounds. He gets the 2 points. And then, of course, everybody's favourite little boy, Bryce Cotton, 49
GOAT.
points, 5 rebounds and 4 assists. Takes the 3 points for the Basketball Fix MVP. We'll give you an update on the standings of the Basketball Fix MVP throughout the week and on next week's podcast. Don't forget to check out the fan zone on thebasketballfix.com, where you can partake in the discussion and you can lead the discussion. Write an article, upload videos, podcasts, photos, artwork, anything you want to do to contribute to the basketball community. You can do it right there. Check us out on socials at the Basketball Fix Podcast on Instagram, or the Basketball Fix on YouTube, Facebook, TikTok, all of the channels. We love it. Engage with us. Let us know what you want to see. And as always, we hope you've enjoyed the Basketball Fix and you've gotten your Basketball Fix.
Phoenix forced a turnover at halfway. Clock at 10. Adams the off balance. Oh my goodness!